Okay, think about any time you've sent money or paid for something recently. Grabbing coffee, splitting a bill, paying rent online. Money's always moving, right? But what actually kicks off that movement? Who's behind that initial push? That's really the core question we're going to dig into today.
Exactly. We're focusing on something that sounds simple but is incredibly important, the originator of a financial transaction.
Hmm.
And for this deep dive, we're drawing insights from Originator FinCrime Intelligence, a platform that's all about, well, understanding and fighting financial crime.
Right. So think of this as your guide to a really fundamental piece of the financial puzzle.
Yeah, something often overlooked.
Our mission here is pretty clear to figure out who this originator is, why identifying them matters so much, and what makes it sometimes surprisingly tricky. It really gets to the heart of financial transparency and security, and there's quite a bit to unpack.
Definitely.
So, to start us off, fundamentally, what is an originator in finance?
Well, in the simplest terms, the originator is just the party that starts a financial transaction. Could be a person, a company, any entity really. They initiate the payment, the transfer of funds. And as our source material highlights, this is super relevant now with electronic transfers, payment systems.
So, they're the who that starts the what, the first domino.
Precisely. Identifying that first actor is fundamental. It's how you trace things, verify legitimacy.
And it's not just individuals sending like $10, right?
Oh, not at all. Could be an individual paying a bill, sure. But it could also be a huge corporation settling a trade deal, or even a government sending out payments.
So the scale varies wildly.
Exactly. The critical point is they are the starting point in that chain. If you don't know who that is, clearly, well, the whole system gets murky. You lose accountability. And that, as we'll see, opens the door to problems.
Right, which leads perfectly into the next question. Why is there such a big focus on identifying them? It's
Hmm.
clearly not just for, bookkeeping.
No, definitely not just administrative. Financial institutions are actually legally required. They have to collect, verify, and pass on originator details. That goes for transactions happening inside a country and those crossing borders.
A legal obligation.
Yes. And it's not arbitrary. It's a massive part of preventing illicit stuff. Think money laundering, terrorist financing, fraud, sanctions evasion. All those things thrive when the source of funds is hidden.
So knowing the originator is like getting that first crucial clue, it can help unravel a whole potential mess.
Hmm.
Our source mentions specific international rules on this. Let's start with FATF Recommendation 16. What's that about?
Okay, so FATF, the Financial Action Task Force, sets global standards against money laundering and terrorist financing. Recommendation 16 zooms in on wire transfers, specifically cross-border ones. It basically says financial institutions must include specific originator info in those transfers.
To create a trail.
Exactly,
Right.
an audit trail. So law enforcement, regulators in different countries can follow the money if needed. It's about removing the anonymity criminals love in international transactions.
Makes sense. And then there are regional rules, like the EU's wire transfer regulation, the WTR. How does that compare?
Right, the EU WTR takes those FATF principles and actually broadens them.
Mm.
It requires originator data for all fund transfers, not just cross-border, but also those happening entirely within the European Economic Area.
So even more comprehensive within the EU.
Yeah, it shows a real commitment to traceability, making it harder for dirty money to move around undetected inside the EU system.
And what of the US? There's the FinCEN travel rule.
Yes, the travel rule from FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, it mandates that institutions pass on specific info about both the originator and the beneficiary for certain transfers, generally those $3,000 or more.
Ah, so a threshold there, but the same goal.
Same fundamental goal, create a clear record for larger transactions that might carry a higher risk.
Okay, so we have these rules demanding information. But what kind of information? You said it's more than just a name.
Yeah, a name alone often isn't enough, right? Too many John Smiths. Typically, the rules require the full name, yes, but also the account number or maybe a unique transaction ID. And critically, at least one other identifier.
Like what?
Could be an address, home, or business, a national ID number, maybe a customer ID the bank assigns, or even date and place of birth. The idea is to collect enough distinct pieces of data to be pretty confident about who exactly is sending the money, to differentiate them.
Okay, so multiple data points to build a solid identity trail. Authorities can then follow the money, assess risks. Now, our source talks a lot about due diligence. What does that actually mean for banks when it comes to the originator?
Due diligence is it's the whole process banks use to really know their customers. KYC, know your customer. Applied to the originator, it has a few key parts. First, there's customer due diligence, CDD. That means actively checking the originator's identity is real. And also kind of assessing if the source of the funds they're sending seems legitimate.
Checking the who and the where from.
Exactly. Then there's sanction screening. That's mandatory. Checking the originator against global sanctions lists. Make sure you're not dealing with prohibited parties.
Right. I don't want to facilitate transactions with sanctioned individuals or entities.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
And finally, there's ongoing transaction monitoring. Watching for weird patterns, lots of transfers to risky places, unusually large amounts that don't fit their profile.
So it's not a one-time check, it's continuous.
It has to be. It's like a layered defense system.
And if institutions drop the ball on this, if they don't do this diligence properly,
The consequences can be pretty severe. Big regulatory fines, compliance failures, reputational damage is huge too. And worse, they could end up accidentally helping criminals move money. Nobody wants that.
a very strong incentive to get it right. But like anything complex, I assume there are challenges. What makes getting originator info right so difficult sometimes?
Oh, definitely challenges. A big one is just data quality. You get inaccurate info, incomplete info from the customer, maybe from another bank down the line.
Especially in cross-border stuff.
Exactly. Cross-border payments, correspondent banking. The chains can get really complex. Information can get fragmented, even lost, as it passes through different banks. Sometimes originator details just get obscured.
Like a game of telephone with financial data.
Sort of, yeah. And another issue is the lack of standardization. Different systems, especially older ones, use different message formats, different data fields. It makes consistently capturing and sending the right info in a way everyone understands pretty hard. Different systems speaking different languages, basically.
That sounds like a recipe for friction and errors, but things are improving, right? Our source mentions some solutions.
Yes, thankfully. The industry is working on it. A big one is the move towards ISO 2022 messaging standards. Unlike the older formats, ISO 2022 allows for much richer, more structured data. That really helps capture and share detailed originator info consistently.
Better data, better tracking.
Pretty much. We're also seeing KYC utilities pop up shared platforms to help standardize and streamline customer checks across different banks, reduces duplication, improves accuracy, and better customer reference databases help institutions track and verify originator info more effectively over time, too.
So technology and standardization are helping. Good. Now, let's shift gears a bit to what the source calls the dark side. How do criminals actually try to game this system? How do they mess with originator information?
Well, yeah, people involved in financial crime are often pretty clever about hiding where their money comes from. Manipulating originator info is a core tactic. They might use fake IDs, obviously, or set up shell companies, companies that just exist on paper, no real business to look like legitimate senders.
Creating a false front.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another trick is structuring. Breaking big sums into lots of smaller payments, often just below the reporting thresholds, hoping to fly under the radar. Very. They also route money through loads of different banks, different countries, creating these incredibly complex paths to make it almost impossible to trace back to the real illicit source. And, sadly, they look for weaknesses, vulnerabilities in how data is sent, gaps in rules between different countries. They exploit those.
It sounds like a constant battle, a real cat and mouse game.
It really is, and the stakes are incredibly high.
So the response from regulators, from the banks, has to keep evolving too.
Absolutely. There's a huge push now for end-to-end transparency, really understanding the entire flow of funds, and a much bigger focus on beneficial ownership, figuring out who really owns or controls the money behind any shell companies or complex structures. The goal is making sure the originator isn't just a name on a form, but someone known, legitimate, and accountable.
So boiling it all down, what's the main takeaway here about the originator?
I think the fundamental point is this. The originator isn't just a minor detail. It's foundational. It's core to every payment. Having accurate, verifiable information about who starts the money moving is absolutely vital for trust and integrity in the whole financial system.
It's the bedrock.
It really is. It's how we track funds, how we prevent misuse.
And for the institutions, the message seems crystal clear. Managing this originator risk isn't just about ticking compliance boxes.
Not at all. It's about protecting the entire system. They need top-notch data quality, they need to keep up with regulations, and they need the right technology. Meeting those global standards for fighting money laundering and financial crime, it all hinges on getting the originator part right.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive. It's amazing how something that sounds so basic, who sent the money, is actually such a critical piece in fighting financial crime and keeping the system transparent.
It absolutely is.
Hmm.
And, given all the challenges we talk about, verifying identities across borders, the complexity, the criminals trying to hide,
Yeah.
it leaves you with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? Looking forward, what else is needed? What new tech, what kind of international cooperation will really boost our ability to trace funds and clamp down on financial crime even more effectively in this super connected world?
A lot to think about there.
For sure. Understanding the originator is crucial, but it's just the beginning of tackling that larger challenge.